But you're not being reminded of it that much anymore. I very seldom see the name Hansie Cronje in the media. You're living a fairly low-profile life these days. We meet every morning to decide what's going to be in the show that afternoon. We toss around ideas. Some things are incredibly obvious, stuff that's in the news, you've got to follow up on that. And for the rest, you're just looking for something that people might want to hear. And one of the producers that morning said, we haven't heard from Hansie for a long time. We wonder how he's doing. We knew that he'd moved up to Pretoria and he'd started working for the earth moving company there, but then he'd gone quiet and we thought, how's he doing? Is he happy? Is he missing cricket? How's he feeling about everything? So without sort of much expectation of getting the interview, we called the last cell phone number that we had for him. He answered and he said, yeah, okay, sure, I'll do it. Personally, how are you? You sound fine to me. There's a kind of quietness coming across in this phone conversation that didn't seem to be there before all the trouble. Are you well? Are you happy? Are you strong?
Yes, I am well and happy and strong, and obviously I'm enjoying the new challenges of this job. It certainly is a steep learning curve, but I'm very excited about the prospect of working with Gary and Pete and Paul Bell and the family and the business. It's really exciting stuff. I'll be foolish to say that I'll just put it all behind me and then move on. I mean, it doesn't just happen like that. I think it was a song by Lorika Rach that says, "Die skoene sal jy dra," which means, whatever you do in your past, you'll have to carry that with you for the rest of your life. And I'm not saying it's pulling me back, but you certainly can't think that it never ever happened. But you just got to manage it and carry on forward.
It was a pleasant interview, and he spoke from the heart. He spoke with great vulnerability and honesty about what had happened to him, and it was one of those interviews that when you finish you say, yeah, I'm glad I did that.
Then on the Friday night he was supposed to fly back and he missed his flight because of a hailstorm, but he phoned you from the car on the highway and said that he's stuck in traffic.
Yes, and I got very upset. I told him to get out and run to the airport. Our time was so precious that we had over weekends that, and he had his study school that whole week, and he was going to come early the Friday morning. Oh no, he was going to come the Friday afternoon at 4, and we had a supper with Gordon and Marge, and the next day we would have had a full day, and the Sunday, and then that next week he was going to go to England with his work. So I was quite desperate to see him and spend some quality time with him. And when he phoned and said about the hailstorm, I was very disappointed, and I could hear that he was disappointed. But I remember that, and he packed out laughing when I said, well, just jump out the car and run to the airport. He thought it was very funny.
And then he had to catch he felt he wanted to take the Air Aquarius flight rather than wait for the South African Airways flight for the next day.
Yeah, we had a discussion about that. He said that he's going to get a lift with the mail plane, we used to call it. And I said to him, there's no use in doing that because you're going to be exhausted when you get here anyhow. Why don't you sleep well and then just come in the morning? But he said, no, he'll rather early in the morning be here and spend the whole day than getting here at 11 o'clock the next day. So he was quite adamant that he wanted to get a lift with the mail aeroplane, which meant that he had to get up at midnight to go to the airport. And I waited, and by 7 o'clock I thought it's a bit strange that they haven't landed, but I thought maybe with the weather they were a little bit delayed, and I waited.
And when did you speak to anyone the first time after?
I remember I took the lady that helped me with the breakfast to her house because it was still a little bit windy at about 7:30, and then I started to get worried. I didn't know why I should be worried. I was just worried that I haven't heard anything from Hansie. And normally Hansie, even if he wasn't stuck in Bloemfontein, he would, and even if it was middle of the night, he would either phone me or send me an SMS. And I remember I got back home and I felt quite anxious, and I actually climbed back into our bed with my clothes on, and I opened my Bible, and I just remember the first sentence that I read said, and Samuel died. And I thought, sure, but no. and then the phone rang next to me, and it was Gavin from Air Aquarius, and he just said to me that, have I heard anything? His first words was, have you heard anything from Hansie? And I said, no, why? And he said, no, well, the plane's missing. And it was one of the worst days of my life. And I said, what do you mean the plane's missing? And he said, no, they came into land and they missed the landing, and he said maybe they diverted to Oudtshoorn. And I said to him, if they had diverted to Oudtshoorn, Hansie would have let me know, because he knows that I'm waiting for him. And instantly I knew that something was seriously wrong. And I said to him, well, what now? Because I didn't want Mum and Dad to find out anywhere else. I wanted to phone them. And he said, no, wait, well, as soon as I have more news, I'll let you know. And that hour went by so slowly, and I think I phoned him every 5 minutes. And eventually he said to me, no, I think I must tell Hansie's Mum and Dad. And then I phoned Mum and said that. And she didn't even know that Hansie missed his aeroplane due to the weather in Joburg.
That was surely yes, that was devastating news, but you always had the hope that maybe he'd landed somewhere safely on a parcel. And I kept ringing his cell phone. The voicemail came on every time.
For some reason, Renee and me got out some photo albums and were looking through these albums, and we saw these photographs of that first season where we were in England, and Hansie and me and Renee and Debbie were at Trafalgar Square, and these pigeons were sitting on Hansie's head because he had these curly hair. Their feet could get stuck in his hair. They couldn't quite sit on my hair because it's a bit too straight. And right then the phone rang, and it was my cousin Hettian calling from my parents' place saying that Hansie's plane had gone missing. And I wasn't even aware that he had been on a flight.
He put down the phone and he said it was his cousin who phoned and said, you know, we should phone his mom. She doesn't want us to know or worry us, but Hansie's plane, you know, is gone. He was supposed to land 7 o'clock. It's already, I think, 8:30, and nobody knows where the plane is. Bad weather in George, and they're worried.
I got on my knees in the room and I was praying and asking the Lord to protect Hansie, but it was really strange. It was as though I was asking for something that was just not going to happen. It was as though I was praying into this brick wall and it was just not going to happen. I mean, I'm not the kind of person that can sit still and wait for something. So I said to Renee, she needs to wait in Cape Town with the kids. I'm going to drive through to George and see if there's anything I can do to help.
When I got the news, the first thing that came to my mind was to let Evie know. And you won't believe it, but they didn't have a signal on the farm where they were. But just prior to Bertha's-Square, I received an SMS from Evie saying that there's in Afrikaans you would say a droewige suidwestenwind. It was a dreary southwesterly wind blowing that morning.
And I had this dream on Friday night, early Saturday morning before I woke up. And I said to Tata, I had a terrible dream. And 7:30, I still said to the people at the breakfast table, something is happening today and I don't know what. And about 20 past 10, my wife phoned, she spoke to Tata and said, Hansie's plane is missing. And I knew immediately, you know, something bad happened.
And I got a call that Saturday morning of the accident from the tower. And we told me there's an aircraft missing. If I prepare to go and look at it, for it. I said, no, if the weather's okay, we will go and look in the mountains. But I didn't, at that stage, nobody told me who was in the aircraft. They only told me there's an aircraft missing.
What was the weather like?
At that stage, the mountains was still closed in, it was raining. So we had to wait for a while. We left off about 10 o'clock here at George Airport. And we went straight to the mountains to the north and fly and follow the mountain range to the east. And I remember since we left off here till we find the wreckage, it was 20 minutes. It was 20 minutes. We found it very quickly, actually.
They called and said that they found Hansie's plane. It was crashed on the mountain, but there was no way to determine whether anyone survived the crash. They're still trying to get down to the plane. There may still be hope that Hansie could be alive. I immediately called my mum to tell her that, and as I called my mum, I just heard her shout, "My seun, my seun." which means my son, my son. Because what had happened a few minutes before that was someone called from George saying that Hansie's plane had landed safely and he was fine. So she thought, wow, he's okay. And here a few minutes later I called to say, no, the plane is crashed. That was a devastating blow to her. But I said to her, listen, we got to continue to pray, he may still be alive.
I was the first person on the crash site. I was the first person who saw the people, who saw the wreck. We landed there. I went down to the aircraft to see if there's any survivors.
And then they found Hansie, and I still didn't believe that. I thought maybe he's just very injured, you know, and I even thought maybe that's why I had to work at the disabled sport, because maybe, you know, maybe he'll be in a wheelchair, but it never crossed my mind that he couldn't be.
The right side of the fuselage was tear open, and I saw there was somebody in the seat sitting there. And with a shock, I realized it was Hansie when I arrived there. You know, he was sitting with his left hand in front of his face, with his fist closed. I remember it very clearly.
They called and said to me, no, they actually got down to the plane, Hansie is dead. And would I mind calling my family to tell them that? I think by then they were just so tired and they just didn't have the strength left to call the family. And I said, I'll do it. And it was one of the most difficult things I had to ever do. I called my mum and I said to her, Hansie is dead. And I called my dad. I called my wife Renee, and then I called Bertha. And I think when I eventually spoke to Bertha, I just couldn't get anything out. It was just so difficult. And I just said to her, Hans is gone.
Yeah, it was hard.
And just after that, my cell phone's battery went flat and I couldn't speak on the phone anymore because I still had another 2 hours to drive through to George. At that point in time, it was halfway through on my journey, and I got to a little place called Buffeljachts, and there was this BP garage on the side of the road. I pulled over, I went into the men's room, and I just wept. I just wept out. I washed my face, I drank some water, and then I got going again in the journey towards George.
That day when Hansie died, it was my wedding day, you know. And I spoke to him 8 o'clock the Friday night, and he said to me, cousin, I will make it, just get everything ready. If I don't make it tonight, I will be there tomorrow morning, you know, early. But I won't disappoint you. So the Saturday day at the Ottendian Hotel where my reception was, I got the message as my reception was busy. The waiter came to me and said to me that Hansie was in a plane crash, he died, you know, and I couldn't believe it, you know. It was like everything just stopped, you know, in George, you know, because it was like a shock through the people, you know.
I was watching something on television, and the phone went, and Ines sort of it was your mom. And Ines' first response was, hi, you know, how are you all? And then there was like a silence. And then she came through and she told me. It just hit me like a thunderbolt. I know my wife was very emotional, and me too.
I remember walking down the 18th at Durban Country Club. It was my halfway, so after 9. The pro came out and he said, please would I phone home urgently? And I knew that something was serious because some of the kids or whatever. And Joni just said to me, Hansie's dead. I couldn't believe it. I just wept. I wept like a child for days. I could never really accept because he became so much part of my life. Every day I used to speak to him.
I just cried, you know. I haven't cried for a long time, but I had tears, and Shane Tracy obviously also knew Hansie as well, and it was a particularly difficult time. Again, just the questions, you know, why, Lord, you know, why take someone at a time when they're re-establishing and getting their life back together again. And So yeah, a very difficult time for us.
It just blew me away. Blew me away. Yeah, it was just a shocking day. I just clearly remember it, and yeah, it was just unbelievable because and I think the reason more than anything was like it was just unfinished business for me, because I think Hansie Cronje would have come back a very powerful person. I think he had a lot to offer.
He had such a presence about him. He was somebody that needed to be in the front. He was a leader. He was a great leader of men. You know, you talk about sportsmen being prime ministers and things like that. Hansie was somebody that could have led this country. And he was battling, and I really believe that God took him home. I really believe that that accident was divine.
And then I drove through, got to George, and got to where Bertha was at home. It was incredibly difficult to walk into her house knowing that she's just lost her husband. And we just cried together. You know, and I spent the evening at their house at Ferncourt, and because the weather was so bad and the terrain so difficult, they couldn't get the 3 bodies, Hansie and the 2 pilots, off the mountain on that Saturday night. And I remember speaking to the people at the rescue mission as well, saying, just don't risk your lives. You know, it's not worth it. Get them down when you can get them down. So they were only able to get the bodies down on the following morning, on the Sunday morning.
We tried to hover over the wreckage, but the downwash was a little too much, and it was in danger of blowing pieces of the aircraft around, of the wreckage. So we took the police up the hill, about 100 yards up the hill, and we dropped them off there with a rescue winch. Well, unfortunately, no accident site is a pretty thing. But as it happens in many aircraft accidents, the tail of the aircraft wasn't as badly damaged as the front. But there's a logical explanation for that, because it obviously stalled in. It didn't go anywhere, it crashed exactly where it hit. And the tail was still relatively in one piece, but the front of the aircraft had whiplashed forward, and that's what caused fatal injuries. It would have in any case.
Then they asked if I would go and identify Hansie's body. Bertha felt that she didn't want to go and see Hansie, and I was really nervous. I didn't know what to expect. I can remember driving to the police station and praying and saying to God, you know, if you want me to pray for him to be raised from the dead, tell me before I get there. I think I was so hoping that there's some hope left. Is there some way that God's going to raise him from the dead, or that there's some miracle that, you know, it wasn't really Hansie, it was someone else. But when I walked into the police station and I saw his body, I had this tremendous peace come over me, that I saw Hansie's body lying there, and yet I wasn't sad. Yet I wasn't overcome with emotion, because it just felt to me that Hansie was gone. And it was always going to be that way, that on the 1st of June 2002 was going to be Hansie's time to go home, to be with God, to be with the Lord. But in God's grace, he had allowed him 2 years to make right, 2 years to put the things right in his own life and to mend the relationships that he had to mend. And I had such a realization as well that our real life is spiritual. Our life is not this flesh. This flesh is temporary. It gets old, it gets grey, and we're all going to die. But our life is spiritual, and that spiritual, the life Hansie Cronje had already gone. That was already gone. That helped me in a tremendous amount to cope with Hansie's death.
I woke up the day after Hansie died at 5 o'clock. They gave me a little sleeping tablet, and I walked to Hansie's favourite hole, the 17th of the Montague, and it was pitch dark, and it was middle of the winter, the 2nd of June, and I just sat there and till the sun came up, and it was just unreal. It didn't make sense, and the next morning exactly the same thing happened. And I remember going upstairs to the study and sitting in front of the computer and thinking, I have to pay the bills and I earn 4,500 rand at the school. I can't do this. And Kate and Jonty came and sat there with me and calmed me down. And I mean, it was just unreal things. It was a tough time, but the love and support of the people that's close to you and everywhere around us help you through.
We just saw Baz, and we got such a fright, you know, her trying to get up and pay the garden guy, or sort the underfloor heating out, and her life in absolute turmoil. and just trying to maintain some sort of sense or sensibility out of the whole thing. I mean, the least we could have done was help her pay the bills. So it wasn't a case of, it was just a case of we could be there. I mean, the job that I had at that stage, I could spend time there. Kate, we had left Daniela at home, and Kate had time as well. So time was the only thing that we had, and I suppose was the thing that was most needed at that stage. So it was just what friends do, I suppose.
Everything was so unreal. I mean, I don't think you take it all in. I mean, I couldn't believe that I was getting a picture to put on Hansie's funeral paper, or I had to choose the clothes that he had to wear in his coffin. And I mean, it was just so unbelievably unreal. It was like a nightmare. Yeah, but there was also good things, the love of the people and the compassion. The flowers everywhere, even in front of the gate here and at our folks' house, and just the love and support of everybody around us.
When Hansie died, we just felt this is the way we should pay him back, you know. We actually, everyone gave a donation of 5 rand, you know, and we bought a bouquet over like 400 rand, you know, which was the biggest, you know, and we just showed in this regard we will give him our respect, you know, showing how deep and how much we loved him as a person, you know, and that's why we went to that extent, you know.
But it was amazing because within the first day, there was just so many flowers that we couldn't find any more pots. There wasn't place to, even if somebody brought us vases, you know, to actually put it in the house. And literally people just started putting it in the fence. And we just saw this fence of flowers. And it's such a kind act, you know, from strangers, you know, towards us. And I can see what it's doing to my mother-in-law, what it's doing to my father-in-law and Hansie's sister Hester and to Frans. And I can feel what it's doing in my own heart. But towards the evening, you know, we just suddenly heard voices. And all of us walked out because outside was one of the university residences. I think it was the nurses' residence. And what they did was put candles in brown bags, and they were all holding candles, and they've put these brown bags, you know, lit with candles around the fence. And we could see the flowers, you know, and this light. And they were just singing just hymns. I think they were singing hymns to us, you know, and just songs of comfort. And I remember us just, you know, just getting together, you know, and just holding on to one another and just enjoying this kindness, you know, that was shown to us by total strangers, and the comfort that I could see that it was giving the family, you know, it was one of the greatest things to experience that day.
Being in Bloemfontein and beginning to arrange the funeral was incredibly difficult as well, but again it was made easy with the friends around us. Louise Klopper then really helped with arrangements. She's an incredibly good organizer, and being a personal friend as well, you know, we all trusted that she would arrange it and organize it in the way that would be best. While I was in Bloemfontein, my dad and me and Les Saxton, who was Hansie's lawyer, had a little meeting and were discussing what should happen at the funeral, when the question just popped up from somewhere, what if the cricket authorities want to be there? The United Cricket Board of South Africa, you know, should they be there or not? And we kind of discussed it, and at that stage we felt that we really wanted a low-key funeral. We didn't want this big event. And we thought that if any of these authorities came, that the Free State public would react maybe even violently against it, because by now the Free State public had really got to dislike the United Cricket Board because of the way they treated Hansie, and now that he was dead, it just made matters worse. So the three of us decided to send, you know, a fairly polite letter to the United Cricket Board and say that we think they shouldn't come to the funeral. And we sent this fax off to them. And just after sending the fax, I spoke to Bertha, and she said, no, please don't do that. Hansie would have liked everybody to be there and certainly wouldn't have liked anybody to be excluded. So I quickly called and said, please, don't send that fax out. Everybody is welcome. And our understanding was that that fax wasn't sent out. But then the next thing we saw in the media was all over the posters saying that the United Cricket Board are not welcome at Hansie's funeral. And then we quickly had to communicate to everybody saying, no, it's not the case. Hansie actually really would have liked everybody to be there, and as a family we extend our welcome to anybody that want to attend the funeral.
There was a press report the day before the memorial service that cricket board officials are not welcome at the funeral. So I phoned you, Dad. And he wasn't being direct with me, and I said, Evie, yes or no, do you want me to come down? He said yes. No, I'm glad I went.
And it was really great to see Dr. Bacher there as well. When he arrived in Bloemfontein, I think the first thing he saw on one of the posters was, on one of the local newspaper posters, was that he's not welcome in Bloemfontein, which was a great shock to him driving in, and I think it saddened him as well.
The Volksblad said Bacher nie welcome in Bloemfontein. Then I got out of my car and there was a lady, Afrikaans. She started to scream at me, shout at me, and really looked, it was going to get very, very ugly. And then what happened was Minister Balfour's bodyguards were there, and they intervened. And I think Terry Lakota came down as well, because he was once the Premier of the Free State, and I think his bodyguards intervened. But the only time I felt welcome there was after the memorial service. I remember there was tea and coffee, and I remember your family coming up to me.
But to us as a family, it was great to know that Dr. Bacher was there as well, along with so many other people, so many other friends and family.